Hello, my name is ITEA-VISDOM, and I'm going to be showing you the teaching dashboard that we have developed as part of the VISDOM project. So, teaching dashboard. The most common thing that you use here is the status view. So let's start by selecting the status view. The status view allows us to see current student statuses, and we start with one graph. We could have several graphs. We start with one graph, and we start by identifying which course we are interested in looking at. The default mode is the point mode, and let's look at that for a while. And while the week 1 is not very informative, let's choose week 4. Week 4 on the course that we are looking at is an interesting week because there is a larger individual project that the students need to complete. To get a better view, let's sort this bar chart, and let's sort by how many points they have gained by week 4. Now, we can see that at the left, there are students who haven't got any points. The red bar indicates that they have missed all possible points that they could have gained until that week. The shaded green shows how many points they have gained up until this week. And then the light green, starting from above the shaded area, shows how many points they have gathered from week 4. So on the right-hand side, they have the full light green bar, meaning that they have gathered all points possible from week 4. And the students at this end have also gathered most of the points that they could until from the previous weeks. Some have missed a couple of points. So there are some students who have gained all possible points, but from these red bars, we can see that students who have completed the maximum points for week 4 might have missed a couple of points in the previous weeks. And there are students who have gained a lot of points in week 4, meaning that they have been able to complete the demanding individual projects, even though they have missed quite a lot of points in the previous week. Okay, we might look at another week. Week 7 is another week where they have this individual, larger individual project, so kind of a breaking point week for students. And let's sort again by week 7. We could have ascending. We can switch to descending. Or we could have this by week 4. So we can compare like how those students who did well on week 4, they are here, how they are doing for week 7. So we can see that some students who did well in week 4 are doing well in week 7 as well. But some students who had done well in week 4 have not done so well in the week 7 task. So there is a bit of difference. So it's not consistent how students keep up. And some students who have done mediocre in week 4 have raised up and done better during week 7. Now, in addition to point mode, one interesting view or mode we often used in the teaching use case is submission mode. Submission mode shows how many exercises there were on each week. So we had 1, 2 exercises, and it shows how many attempts it was required from students to complete it. The lighter green shade shows that they were able to successfully complete an exercise in under 5 attempts. A dark green shade shows that they required more than 5 attempts to get an acceptable submission. In this case, you can see from the tip text that for this particular student, it required 10 attempts to successfully submit the exercise. The red bars show that the student has made an attempt for the exercise, but they have failed. The first exercise of week 7 is this larger group project, where it is expected that it takes several tries to make it successful, and there are more failed attempts because it is a more difficult task. If we compare it to a normal week, we could look at week 5, there have been 4 exercises. You can see that there's a lot of the lighter green, so the students have not required that many attempts to successfully complete their exercises. Now, we might look at some individual students. In this week 7, we see that these students have failed. We might look at how these students have performed in the past. What has been the trend? Have they been able to complete exercises well until now, or have they just experienced troubles in this week? So we have the right course ID. We have the student ID has been brought by selecting the students in the status view. And here we are shown an EKG view. To get a grasp of the legend, we can look at the question mark. It shows that this red pulse-like bar shows maximum points available for a week. The green pulse-like bar shows how many points the student has been able to gather during a week. And then this yellow pulse-like bar shows how many students we would how many points we would expect the students to gather to achieve some grade. The triangular bar shows how many submissions the students has had to make to get the points. And this shows whether the students would be likely to pass. Now we can see there are different number of points available for each week. So as we can see from the variation in the red bar, which was the maximum points available. So the interesting here in the EKG view is the difference between the red bar and the green bar, the difference between the maximum points and the gained points, as well as the triangle showing the number of submissions. So the student has not been getting maximum points, but they have not missed that many points either. So here we can see that there's a bit of a difference. Then there's a bigger difference in week 4, which was the first week of the individual larger project. Then the students had gained better points in the next week, then missed. Again, in week 7, they have had the difficulties. They were not able to complete the individual project, but they have carried on and gained points in the following week, nearly maximum here. So we can see that the student is making an effort and performing in a quite consistent manner, but these larger individual projects are the ones that are giving some trouble. If needed, using this information, we could contact the student and ask what is the difficulties. For the EKG view, we can also define our own configuration. This is the default submission configuration. We could have all kinds of, like, for example, default points configuration. So here we would have points to pass as a different. But we could also create our own view, or we could modify an existing view. If we try for a test view, we could say we have the point, and we could have maximum points. Let's take the color. We would have the pink maximum points, and we could have the pulse for both. And then we won't be interested in the number of submissions. And let's have that as a triangle, and maybe like a purple triangle. And then we might also be interested in number of exercises attempted. So how many has the student actually attempted? And let's have this as an orange triangle. And let's have this filled so it's a little bit easier to read. So now we could have this as our new test configuration, and we can save it under a new name. Now it would appear here, our new configuration. This allows you to choose the variables that you are interested in when you are looking into how a student has been performing throughout the course. In addition to just checking how students have been doing for 1 week, how the points have been accumulating, and checking one student based on a performance for 1 week, the most interesting thing for teachers has been utilizing 2 graphs. So here we have another graph by default appears at the below the first one, but a more intuitive way is to look at them side by side. So a common way of utilizing this dashboard is to have a course ID here, and then we would have the week here, and we would have the submission mode, and then we could have the same course. We could have the same submission mode, and then we could have another week. So here week 14 is also a week where they had the last larger individual project. We can sort this, and as you can see, by default, the graphs are sorted with the same parameters. So you know that if you are looking at a student here, so the last bar in this graph, the same student is in the last bar in the following graph. Interestingly, the student here has passed the individual project in week 7, but not completed it in week 14. So we can compare how the same student has performed looking at the views from different weeks. And we can see how what kind of changes there are in completing certain kinds of exercises when we know what are the key weeks for a course. In addition to comparing weeks, we may also compare course implementations. So we could select here another course. This is the same course, Programming 2, but it has been implemented in a different manner, so that while course ID 90 was carried out over 2 periods, course ID 117 was carried out in just 1 period, so in twice as fast. And it would be interesting to see what kind of patterns there are in completing the exercises for these 2 courses. There's a lot less data available for this course. There were less students there and less students who are giving permission to use the data. But we can see that there is intuitively the similar kind of pattern on number of failed attempts and how much there is the dark green. So a lot of required attempts in comparison to how much light green there is. We can look at week 4, which was the first week with the larger project. So here you can also see that there were these standard exercises, but then there was this larger project, which was exercise 3. There is a distinguishable number of failed attempts, so these red bars, and then quite a lot of dark green, and then some students who were able to do it very quickly. And the same kind of pattern can be seen here in the other course. So this was the demo of the teaching dashboard